welcome to the House of ZK Radio, which is a focused podcast and media channel exploring everything ZK, zero knowledge. Now we have an interview with Daniel, who is CMO at LazAI. Thank you so much for being here today, Daniel. Really would be very excited to talk about some of the data misalignment problems that we see so far, how LazAI is addressing them, and what's new, what's up next for LazAI as you guys are preparing for the mainnet launch.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And this is actually a really cool event. I love the venue, right? It's not like a little tiny restaurant or a cafe. It's actually really nice. It feels very historical too. So lovely to be here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And yes, this venue does have some historical roots to it. So that was one of the reasons why we chose it. But I'm wondering if we can first start off with this conversation on just some general context as to the exact challenges that LazAI is addressing, specifically within data misalignment. So wanted to hear from you, what are the key challenges that exist within our AI systems today, especially when it relates to model collapse, the data misalignment problem, siloed data ecosystems, and how LazAI is planning to address these different areas.
Right. So the AI and blockchain space is in a bit of a weird phase right now, where they're transitioning from very niche-focused solutions to a bit more holistic solutions. So, for example, we keep talking about the data problem, and there's been a lot of projects that started out with the data problem, and they only service that one little niche of the whole AI pipeline. Nowadays, we're seeing a bit more that's a bit more holistic in their approach. So whether they're a layer one or whether they're an infrastructure to pretty much service the whole thing. And that's similar to what we're doing actually, right? So we did start off focusing on the data problem. Data problem is pretty simple. You train AI with data, so the data has to be good data, and it has to be aligned to why you want to create the agent, right? So for example, if it's a healthcare, like a medical provider, a service provider agent, then it should have very good knowledge base of healthcare data to pull on, right? But we keep seeing in AI agents, when you use them, you see things like data hallucinations, you see data biases coming into play. So this misalignment is what we ended up focusing on. It's not that we're just focusing on data, it's that we recognize that there's a misalignment between the intent of the creation of the model and how we want to use the model. So focusing on this allowed us to take a bit of a step back and create a much more holistic approach into how we're servicing the AI space. So that allowed us to basically create a very complete solution that services the whole pipeline. So from data generation, verification, assetization, you can launch models and agents through us. You can use our AI agent framework that we built. We had this whole kind of basically pipeline built out so that we can focus on those small individual things, right? So that we can solve the root causes as well as the results of those root causes.
So right now there's a bit of misalignment between the intent of the model as well as between the intent and then how it's actually executed. And for LazAI, the main focus is addressing each parts of this pipeline, not just say one area within these models, but every single part of it. Got it.
Yeah. But actually, to get back to your original question, again, it is really about that data to start off with, right? Because you need that data to be aligned with why you want to use it, right? So going back to the medical healthcare example, if you do have a lot of data that doesn't really have, I would say, contextual data, then it's not really meaningful in its own right? So you have to contextualize the data, you have to transform it so that you can feed it into the model in a good way. And the model has to understand that context to provide the right care, right? So for example, you can treat, say, hypertension, so high blood pressure, you can treat it as much as you want, but if you don't know that they have high cholesterol, you're not actually solving anything, right? So that kind of that's simplified, but what we're doing is we're adding things like POV data, which is point of view data. So it's not just saying, yes, we have high cholesterol. Maybe it's also splitting that into different kind of lifestyle patterns as well, right? It's giving that human perspective, and that's why we're calling it point of view. And the data that we're encapsulating contains all of that as well. And to actually make that work seamlessly throughout building and launching an agent, that you have to have a whole system that's built around incorporating all these things, right? Because we can provide as much contextual data as we want, but if the models and the agents aren't built to handle that kind of data, then it's pretty useless, right? That's why we ended up building that kind of whole pipeline model.
Got it. So there's two kind of main aspects here. First is having that appropriate context-based data, and that can hopefully relieve some things like biases or potentially hallucinations as the model is given more context. And the other part of it is building the outside structure for being able to feed this kind of context-related data.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it. And I know that LazAI is also really focused on the vision of having composed intelligence as well. So I'm wondering if you can speak a bit about what the idea of composable intelligence means, and then also the real need for AI to adopt composability and how the use of DATs is really fitting into this.
Yeah, so composability to us was pretty key from the beginning. So while building the Aleph AI agent framework, we looked at, what can we incorporate it in to make it basically provide the maximum amount of value that you can to agents. And for us, keeping in line with, the ethos of blockchain, which is composability, right? We've been focusing and we're doing pretty quite well at composability for a while now. So if you look at agents, I'd like to give an example of a logistics company, right? Let's say you own a warehouse and you build an agent to manage that warehouse. So then you start monetizing on it by, selling it on the market. I own a trucking company and I do the same to manage my trucks. Well, what a user can then initiate is we don't have to do it. A user can see that they have a trucking company and a warehousing company that has agents. Well, it can then combine those two together to create a logistics solution rather than just a managing warehouse and managing a trucking company. And doing it that way is quite difficult because now you have to actually look at the composability of these agents rather than how they interact. Because just if you leave it at just interaction, you're looking at it the way that a lot of other projects are doing right now, and that's by sending messages between the agents back and forth. You can do it that way, but the more complex the system gets, the more difficult it is to get proper results out of it. So let's say if I'm building out a product line and I need a logistics solution to handle my products for the next year, then you have, let's say monthly shipments, you have variable timing, you have different insurance plans, you have different, for example, is it freight on board, right? So how are you paying for it? When is it being paid for? When does the ownership transfer? All of these things are very difficult to just do in messages between agents, right? So by focusing on the composability, we can see what would actually make that happen. And you can get the two agents to, for example, share the database. You both look at the underlying data, and then one side proposes a whole plan to the other. And by making the interaction between them actually integrated instead of just sending messages back and forth, you can get that composed solution out of it.
Got it. So more about being able to integrate between these different ecosystems rather than just having agents simply just interact with each other and converse with each other, which has its own kind of caveats and not being able to capture the full picture. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And also wanted to hear more about LazAI's offerings, especially for developers. For developers, the developer tooling that LazAI offers. Wanted to hear about any kinds of specific infrastructure challenges that these AI developers face and what types of tooling that they need that LazAI can provide.
Right. So in terms of infrastructure, if you're building an agent, then hopefully what you're getting a lot of interaction between you and the user, right? So it's not like, for example, a DeFi company or where you can come in, stake once, and that's it. You can leave it for months, weeks at a time, and you don't have to worry about things like transaction costs. You don't have to worry about how quick the network can handle that transaction. For AI agents, that timing, the performance of the network basically becomes much, much more important. And the more successful you are as an agent, the more infinitely difficult it is to handle that amount of traffic going back and forth, for it to actually have a usable, I would say, user experience. Then you need to have it actually executed on a timely manner. right? So that aspect of it, we're also solving basically by providing a high performance network, both on LazAI and by being integrated with Metis' Hyperion as well, which is also focusing on high performance and AI, right? So the tooling that attaches to that high performance network also solves the other side of the equation, where it's not just providing a smooth experience for the user and providing a low cost solution for the developer, but also if you also integrate in things like access to databases, oracles, if you have the APIs. If you use our agent framework, you also get the access to things like interoperability. You get different support for different languages. Pretty much all the common smart contract languages or coding languages we support. And on top of that, even things like the ability to track dynamic data sets with our new token standard. It's called the DAT, Data Anchoring Token. It allows you to track dynamic data sets. So as a developer now, I can look at encapsulating my data set to be able to evolve. You can have your agents and models also evolve over time rather than taking a snapshot and trying to tokenize that, right? So we're giving a lot of freedom and options and basically lowering the hurdles for a lot of developers to come in and build what they want.
Yeah, awesome. And it's really great to hear about the dynamic data collection as well, especially now that a lot of the data sets that we train our models on are kind of fixed. And then unless if we have the release of a new model, that's when it has some more data to be trained on. But it's great to hear that developers can now, with any kinds of changes that they want to make for the data set, those can be included when they're building their models. So really great to hear the kind of flexibility that's offered. And also wanted to hear some of the other offerings that LazAI has and some of the motivations behind the design considerations behind the architecture. So you mentioned the data anchoring token and how it has a marketplace as well. And then there's also the individual centric DAOs and then the verifiable computing framework as well. So wanted to hear more about how all of these components really work together and what's available for the user if they want to get more involved.
Yeah, for sure. I would say the things that you mentioned are technical innovations that has gone into providing our solution. So if you look at DAT, for example, being able to track dynamic data, it has immense value and it can be a very different experience to using static data, right? So for example, if I have an agent or a model that should be consistently updating, right, then obviously I should preferably have a consistently updating database. But if it's just static data, then you have to basically pay for it every single time. And then from the pricing standpoint, then as person who's selling the data, then I have to immensely lower the price because now they have to come back every time to buy it. Well, if I set a dynamic data set, then the pricing scheme completely changes. You can have it on a subscription-based model. You can have it buy once and forget about it, but then you can increase the price massively. From a purchaser of that data set, then again, the same thing comes into play, right? Then I can much better control and have an idea of what the pricing is going to be like. Now, from the agent standpoint, you can also look at different ways of actually generating value instead of even just monetizing. So one of the agents that is launched on LazPad already is called the LazBubu. And what it shows is the capability of the DAT. So the agent evolves with every interaction with you over time. And that is what's actually tokenized, right? It's the evolved, it's the changed and end result of the interactions. So what you're doing is you're putting value into actual interaction instead of just what the data set says, right? So instead of just what it is. So at the end of the day, what we're allowing to happen with the DAT is businesses aren't a static thing. So we're allowing the facilitation of evolving and dynamic environments for both the developers and the users. On the IDAO front, I'll try and be quick because I think I've taken a lot of time. But on the IDAO front, we've seen how the DAO models work out. And until now, it hasn't really worked out as well as we thought it would, right? By providing an endless boundary to a DAO, we thought it would allow anybody to get involved. But what it ended up being is it ended up becoming like a board member, right? Board of directors. Because let's say, I hold Ethereum. I don't really care that much about how the tech develops on Ethereum, so I just delegate my votes, right? You can say, well, it's still working in the right way because the people who know and understand are voting on the right thing. But at the end of the day, that still means I'm still far removed from what value that vote has, right? So on LazAI, we flipped the boundary and we made the DAO centered around an individual. And doing it this way allows us to much tie the user and the actual result of the DAO much closer together. So you get a much better value alignment or objective alignment between the two. So for example, you can focus it around on a DAT. So an agent is controlled by, for example, the people who funded it, who providing the data, who's marketing it, right? And maybe for the users as well. So you can control things like what privacy rights look like. You can look at how royalties work. You can look at how verification works, what kind of point of view data goes into play. So, yeah.
You can really redefine the boundaries to be at the individual level as opposed to, say, like the general company level, and really have it be tailored to that specific individual or user. That sounds great. And also, even when you mentioned about the data anchoring token and some of the other mechanisms that are involved with tracking the evolution of these agents and really contributing to that idea of the dynamic data sets. I think these are all like very important design considerations that the team has made. And I also wanted to hear about some of the current use cases that LazAI is targeting right now. So whether that be within DeFi and AI, that intersection, or with DePIN as well. Are there any current use cases that the team is looking at, or any future use cases that you see really has potential with LazAI?
Well, I really like the logistics solution that I talked about, but that's a way down the line kind of thing. Immediately, at least, the conversations that we have right now are a lot more interesting and kind of things that we can relate to a lot better. So one of them, for example, could be a what would you call it? Tourism, right? So it would be a tour agent that's able to help you plan your vacation, also book them for you, give you recommendations. But all of that will be based off of the data that's provided by the government in link with their tourist agents, tourist minister, right? I guess. And by having this kind of database also tokenized, but also available for the agent, you're allowing democratization of that data. So for them, it's not just available for just this specific agent. Through the IDAOs, what they can do is control what kind of data is actually made public on the marketplace. So for them, it's very easy to come in and say, okay, this type of data is okay to go out. This type of data is, either private data or something that just they should not be sharing. And then it allows businesses and users to come in and get access to the data much easier in a very standardized way. Versus, okay, if I was a business starting out in this area, how would I try and get that data, right? Another one is, for example, we're talking to a game developer AI company. And what you would be able to hopefully do later on is if you launch a game through their agent, then that could get minted as a DAT on our network, basically through a button click. And then that agent would then be able to help either manage that game, or you could even just list that game as a DAT, and you could manage the things like the usage rights, how it's monetized, the fees that would be involved, all of those things through the DAT. So
you can really control the monetization levels.
Yeah.
And then also, even you mentioned that example of selective disclosure, so being able to decide which areas or which parts of the data is kept public and which are kept private.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's great to hear. And just as a last question, for any developers, AI-based developers, for example, in the audience who would like to get more involved with LazAI, what are some next steps for them?
Next steps is go to our website. That's literally first step one. We also have a thriving Twitter account that we're trying to build out, all towards the mainnet. So the one thing to note about us is that our go-to-market is not just try and hype up a token launch, right, which happens quite often. it's not to give out a bunch of grants. It's none of that. What it is our go-to-market is based entirely on the traction that we're going to get through the LazPad Launchpad and the AI agent framework, Aleph. So the more users use Aleph and the more agents that are launched on LazPad, that brings on the interest, that brings on the users, and users can already earn and off-ramp that way because it's already launched on Andromeda Network on Metis, right? We're not just a closed system on testnet where it's kind of play money and nobody really cares until token generation. We're seeing that doing it that way is not really conducive to a longevity of any ecosystem, and it's not really something that can capture interest long term. But the LazPad gives us a completely different avenue where we can have open launches. We can also have curated launches where it's either agents that we're launching or our partners are launching. And it gives a different level of, I'd say, interaction and what we're calling playability for the users to get involved before mainnet. So check out LazPad, check out our website, and please use Aleph.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much, Daniel, for all the insights. Really great to see how LazAI is specifically solving the data misalignment problem and through its different offerings, like with the data anchoring token and with the marketplace as well. So thank you so much for all the insights.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.